The first thing I'll ask you this question. Would the federal government of the United States of America lie to you? That's the response I expect. Laughter. Of course they would. And they have for decades.
I tell people who are interested in listening for whatever it is I have to say that you're in for some difficult times. It's going to happen. There is no way to avoid it.
Robert Harrington was the head of the United States Naval Observatory and had for several years been feeling and believing that there was this huge body out there with the potential of coming back in. He had heard, again, all of the other miscellaneous stuff, and he actually ended up sitting down with, and it was, fortunately, it is on a video, he finally sat down with a Dr. Sitchin, who, of course, was the linguistics expert who read the Sumerian clay tablets and had translated those tablets, and we're talking thousands of 4,000-year-old clay tablets that, in fact, described the planet X coming back around, and he finally got the phone call that he always wanted, and that was from somebody of some credible astronomical skills, and it was Robert Harrington. And Harrington had sat down with him. They recorded their meeting, and Harrington told Sitchin in his face and on camera, he said, "You have been right all along. I have found Planet X, the 10th planet. It is out there, and people, and I can," and he said, "I know where it is. I can pinpoint it at this point in time." And by the way, this is a long time. This is back in the 90s, and it was a short time after that when Robert Harrington died of what I call one of these instant cancers. He got feeling ill, had not even finished his formal report that he was working on Planet X. He became feeling ill, short time later hospitalized, and then a short time later he was deceased.
Maybe you wish to tell us in a few minutes the nature of those discoveries.
I'd be happy to, and you're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, the date on here, I was just noticing, is 14 August 1978, which was just about 6 weeks after we discovered the fact that Pluto has a satellite. Once you have a satellite for a planet, you can determine how heavy it is. It turns out Pluto was very much smaller and lighter weight than we had thought, which meant that Pluto has no influence, no appreciable influence on the motions of the planets Uranus and Neptune. At that point, we voiced the hypothesis that this means that there is at least one yet-to-be-discovered planet in the outer reaches of the solar system, and this naturally led directly to you and your interest in what we're doing, and that's when you sent me this book.
You have then postulated the existence or the appearance in some time years ago of a celestial body which you, I think, named in that paper an intruder.
Yes.
Which may have collided with or somehow turned on their side both Uranus and Pluto.
It did a lot more than that, as a matter of fact. In that paper, we hypothesized that this intruder passed very close to Neptune, that it dislodged one of what we then think were many satellites of Neptune, and one of them became the planet Pluto. We actually think Pluto was an escaped satellite of Neptune. This will also take the orbit of Triton, the big satellite of Neptune, and reverse it. We'll take the orbit of the satellite Nereid and extend it outwards. We can produce all of the observed aspects of the satellite system of Neptune plus Pluto's orbit just with this one single intruding planet. One of the things we did in 1978, having made this prediction that there was an additional planet, 10th or 12th, depending on your point of view, but it's the next one, we sort of put our money where our mouth was, as it were, and we went out and we started looking for this thing. And we've been searching for 12 years for this thing. We've been able to refine the search area somewhat, get it rather narrowed down. We do our predictions based on the observed anomalies in Uranus and Neptune. We actually are currently looking down in the region of Centaurus, which is just south of the constellation Libra, but very close to the area that you've talked about.
I think, Dr. Harrington, you have a pretty good picture, at least in your own mind, of what we are talking about, a big planet, a small planet.
Well, if it is in the kind of orbit that we describe here, it would have to be a planet that would have a mass something like 3 to 5 times the mass of the Earth. This would put it intermediate between the gaseous planets like Uranus and Neptune and the terrestrial planets that we have in the inner part of the solar system. So if this planet turns out to be in a 3,600-year orbit, then its mass would be correspondingly larger. But we're talking about something it's a perfectly reasonable kind of planet. It looks like a good, nice planet, small enough that it's not going to be completely enveloped in gas, so it's perfectly capable of supporting life forms of one kind or another.
If Planet X exists, and I believe that it does, and if you make the assumption that it caused certain events or had certain effects on planet Earth, and while it was in the neighborhood of the solar system, I follow Sitchin's chronology pretty closely. I believe that it was here during the time of the Great Flood. I think it might have contributed, in fact, to the Great Flood, which I think occurred at the end of the last ice age, which was around 11,000 BC, which is 13,000 years ago approximately. I think that if you go with 11,000 BC as a rough estimate of where the flood occurred and where to start, and you divide by 3,600 year increments. And it's important to note, by the way, that the planet Nibiru, once it settled in after the collision and it settled into its orbit, this is something that I didn't mention, it settled into a 3,600 year orbit, a long ellipse, not circular, not counterclockwise, but a clockwise ellipse, like the orbit of a comet. Like the orbit of a comet. What the Sumerians say about the origins of the Anunnaki is that there is another planet in our solar system, the 10th planet, or the 12th planet, if you count the Earth and the Sun and the Moon as planets as well. But for whatever you want to call it, 10th planet, planet X, 12th planet, whatever, there is supposedly, according to the Sumerians, another planet in our solar system. Now, this is pretty staggering to astronomy, but you know that might be true, and yet the evidence is fairly strong that it is, for a number of reasons.
The power behind the scenes has been running this damn thing since 1947, and Ike saw it, scared the hell out of him. He met the Anunnaki, that scared the hell out of him. So they're pulling our strings now like they always have.
When I read a lot of the data that was out there, which really wasn't data, it was more like stories, that whenever you started looking for data, it ended up, you would hit a dead end where you would realize there was mostly circular reasoning, that just because a prior research or whatever had stated it, that has been followed through with this 3,600-year orbit. And then there was multiple claims that, like, it was a mini solar system coming in. Some say it's a giant planet larger than... It went on and on, multiple. So it was pretty much not based in science. And so I did a quick study to start out with, and I said, if this item ever really existed, it should have been noted by the Chinese astronomers, because their documents go back almost 4,000 years. And I stumbled across a study, and that study, I can give you the name of it, was called the Reevaluation of the Eastern and Western Records of the supernova of 1054. And I can share the screen here to show some of you viewers of it. It comes from the Dublin Institute of, they say, Advanced Studies. What they prove is that we had an assumption earlier in the previous century that that some of the data that we were misreviewing pertaining to the supernova of 1054, that we had claimed that it was a supernova. But when we went back and more recently looked at the Chinese documents, some of this data did not correlate with a supernova because it showed, without a doubt, an object moving to multiple constellations. A supernova is stationary. Therefore, it cannot move from a different it has to be stationary in one constellation. And come to find out that the supernova actually was seen two to 3 months earlier. And that this data was actually what they call it a guest star, that the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Korean astronomers had seen in 1054 AD, that this was a sizable object.
What you'll be hearing in this presentation is a very compact version of what's taking me literally 27, 28 years to learn. I've interviewed dozens of people, read thousands of pages of books, watched a number of documentaries, and still get new information every week on this topic of global warming from my confidential sources. This topic, as far as the U.S. government is concerned, is one of the most highly classified matters that the government deals with. Highly classified and highly compartmentalized. People will sometimes flippantly say, well, an organization like the federal government of the United States can't keep secrets. Well, I assure you that they can keep secrets. NASA. Never a straight answer. NASA. July 29th, 2005, announced the finding of the 10th planet, named Xena. Do a Google search. They did. Don't take my word for it. NASA announced the finding of the 10th planet, named Xena, 29th of July, 2005. Parade magazine and the Sunday newspaper. It was the front cover of the January 15th, 2006 edition. A friend of mine, I started telling him about these matters in 2004. After the NASA press announcement in July of 2005, he calls me up and he says, John, you're not crazy. There really is a 10th planet. NASA said so. I said, thank you very much. There has to be a cause. And this is something, quite frankly, we don't need to address it, but we will address it. The cause is the 10th planet. Now, what NASA is calling the 10th planet is not the 10th planet we're concerned about. It's the 10th planet that's referred to in the Bible, also called Wormwood.
In approximately 83, apparently with the launching of a new infrared telescope being put way out in the far reaches of the solar system, apparently Planet X, or the planet called Nibiru, which is mentioned in all the biblical writings. It's mentioned in all Bibles and scriptures from many foreign nations. It's mentioned in historic writings of the Chinese emperor 2,000 years ago. It's written on the side of the walls of temples that were 4,000 years old. There was a study done a while back of the clay tablets that were from Sumeria that had been completely broken down and analyzed by a man named Sitchin, S-I-T-C-H-I-N, and he had deciphered clay tablets. There's 25,000 of these tablets. They actually went back 4,000 years, and they described Nibiru, the planet X, and its relationship to coming back like Halley's Comet, coming back and going around the sun every once in a while, and then going way back out again in orbit, way out past Pluto, and coming back again in a couple thousand years. And this coincided with the biblical talk. It was called wormwood in the Bible, and it's described in, like I said, a whole multiple of biblical scriptures of sorts, coming from around the globe, 2,000, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, in the case of the Sumerian clay tablets. So what they described is Nibiru being a planet in a huge elliptical orbit, similar to that. Like I say, I compare it to Halley's Comet that comes by every 75 years. There's another comet that we recently discovered that came around in 1997. That was called the Hale-Bopp comet. It is similar to Halley's Comet, except that the orbit that the Hale-Bopp comet is in has been calculated to be 4,200 years. Now that's 600 to 800 years longer than the proposed orbit of Nibiru, or Planet X. It's been researched sufficiently that the Planet X has come around several times in the past.
The Sumerians say that in the beginning, as our solar system was forming itself, there was a planet called Tiamat, which was a large planet forming. And it was forming where Bode's law says a planet should be. Now there is a mathematical formula that says in the formation of a solar system like we have, a planet should be at a certain point, at basically a certain size, certain point, certain size, out. What the Sumerians said is where the asteroid belt is, Tiamat was growing, and it was growing at about the right size in the right place. So the natural course of events was occurring at around 4 billion years ago. But a stray planet, they say, was sucked into our solar system. Now, stray planets are possible. We have found that out now, so this is nothing that's incredible. Stray planet came within striking range of our solar system and was captured by the gravitational pull of first the outer planets and then the sun, and it became a stable, permanent member of our solar system. But our regular planets move in counterclockwise circles, roughly. This planet was moving clockwise, and so it's moving against the grain of the flow of the other planets. And coincidentally, it's moving on the plane of the ecliptic. It could have come in north to south, or could have come in at a number of angles, but it just so happened that it came in on the plane of the ecliptic, so that those planets could affect it, so that the sun apparently could affect it and pull it in and capture it. On its second pass around, it hit Tiamat. There was a collision between Tiamat and Nibiru. Nibiru being an older planet somewhat, but still viscous, still able through the pulling of the gravity to have moons pulled out of its body. So it was still viscous, but so was Tiamat. It had more moons pulled out of its body. So we have to assume that Nibiru was perhaps maybe a 500 million years older. We're just estimating. Older, firmer, denser, but still liquidy, still flexible. So there's a collision. Nibiru basically holds together in that collision, but Tiamat does not. Tiamat is shattered into a half of itself. Half of Tiamat is blown away, explosion, poof, and it goes out in pieces. Two kinds. The outer shell, the lighter part of the surface of the cooling planet, is the granites and the water. So They go out and just go in all different directions because they're lighter. The inner viscous core, the magma, which is sticky and not hardened into stone and water, is pulled out in a long string as Nibiru swings by. The sort of the guts of Tiamat are pulled out and strung out. Also in that collision, of course, when two ball-like things hit, there's going to be some movement in a different direction, and that happened as well. So Tiamat assumes a different orbit as Nibiru assumes a different orbit as it continues on, and the remnant of Tiamat assumes a different position in the heavens, inside now Mars.
Now, it doesn't always pass close to Earth. It makes its orbit around the sun. Earth, it's only if Earth is in the same month or zone that it's crossing, because it comes in, let's say, at the end of August, circles the sun and exits around March. So if Earth happens to be in those months at the time, then we have some of these major events that's also documented in the Bible and many other cultures. Using this model that the Chinese, Korean, and Japanese astronomers, with this model that we're able to formulate, what's unique about it, that it gave us a 150 to 152 day separation between entry and exit, and both of its path is on the planetary plane of Earth, crossing Earth's path twice. This was quite startling, and actually I wanted to actually reject it or prove it wrong, because when a larger object is on Earth's planetary plane even once, that's something that's very serious. And this object is proving out to be that it crosses Earth's path twice in the same orbit. The 3,600-year orbit does not apply to this. It would be closer to 360 years.
I know this is all happening. It's going to take place. It's inevitable.
And now I'm going to tell you exactly how it's going to happen, according to putting together all of the dots, connecting all of the dots, not only political, historical, biblical, and non-biblical scriptures written on the top of the mountains by the Tibetan monks that recorded it when it came around, and the emperors of China that wrote it down. And there's a fellow named Gil Bouchard who has done unbelievable, wonderful investigations on the biblical side of this, and can explain a day-to-day description of when it has passed previously and what had taken place and what will take place once again when it passes around the sun and back out. This planet, which is calculated to be 5 times the size of Earth, will have a gravitational effect on the Earth that hasn't been seen since it came by the last time. Now, here's what basically will take place. When it comes back around, it will come in and circle around the sun. It will go behind the sun. It has a long tail behind it, dragging behind it, goes around the sun, and then goes back out again, heading towards the far reaches of the solar system again. It is a solid mass 5 times the size of Earth. It will cause an eclipse of the sun for a period of time. And then we will have a tail of debris being dragged along, gravitationally sucked along behind this original primary planet Nibiru. The Earth, on its regular rotation around the sun, will in fact pass through the tail of Nibiru. When it does that, you will have the equivalent of the biblical meteorites that fell upon the Earth in hail and brimstone. They didn't know how to describe it, but basically we're going to have flaming meteors of different sizes, meteorites, crashing. Actually, we will be crashing through that debris It will take about an hour travel time to pass through it. Then, bearing in mind now the Nibiru would be ahead of the Earth, going around the sun, and it will take about 155 days for Nibiru to come out the other side and head back towards outer space once again, not to come back for some unknown period of time. Now, there's a debate between 2 or 3 different groups of people that have been studying this, and that's okay, because it doesn't affect the bottom line on this. The debate is whether it comes around in 3,005 or 3,600 years, or if it comes around 350 years, which is closer to the figure that Gil Broussard believes in, doing his studies. And he has very good information to back that potentially up in terms of the numbers of years. All right, so here's what I'm saying, where it doesn't make any difference to you and I. If this comes around in our lifetime, then we're talking, it doesn't make any difference if it's been out for 3,000 years or if it has come around 10 times 300, which would be 3,000 years, and coming around 10 times since that same period of time. So in other words, it doesn't make any difference if it's 3,000 or if it's coming around every 300 and 350 years. It does not make any difference, because if it comes during our lifetime, we're the ones who will have to face whatever it will bring with it. And the meteorites, those things where the biblical students talk about that being what is written of in the Wormwood, I believe what it is in reality, it is Nibiru itself is the Wormwood, and all of the debris that will hit Earth when we go through the tail of that thing. Actually, we will plunge through the tail, and it will take whatever. I think it's about 1 hour of actual going through the tail itself. It's actually mathematically been analyzed, but
Sure.
That will bring with it. You see, that will bring with it a multitude of meteors, etc. And I must say this: we already have an increase and a multitude of effects today from Nibiru.
When this 10th planet comes through our solar system every 3,600 years, it just causes severe problems on our planet. Interacting with the Earth electrically and with gravity both. The back of your paper, No Need for Panic, there is a number of books cited that you can get from the library or purchase from different authors that talk in great detail about these planetary matters. Professor James McCanning, who is a credentialed scientist, has written a number of books on this. He's a real astrophysical scientist, and he knows about this stuff. I'm a private detective and a researcher. I'm not a scientist. But I can tell you what the scientists say, because I've read their books. And I can tell you what Dr. Velikovsky said, because I've read his books. And I can tell you what the Bible says, because I've read the Bible. And all these things are true, and all these things are in the process of happening right now. I've heard a number of people tell me, they say, John, the government doesn't want to create panic. That's why they're concealing this. No, the government's not concerned about panic. What the government's concerned about is business owners making very rational, very logical decisions that I'm locking the door and I'm out of here. No panic whatsoever. That's what they're fearful of, because that would shut down the economy if enough of them did it. They want to keep these people in the dark as long as possible. If things get bad and there's what appears to be a need for martial law related to rioting in the streets over economic collapse, people don't have jobs, can't buy food, people will probably go along with martial law under those conditions, because it would appear to be the right thing to do. It would look like a way to get things back to normal, so people will go along with martial law under those conditions. If, however, Martial law is instituted because these oceans are coming. Nobody's going to pay attention to that. They're going to get out of Dodge. Now, Dr. Velikovsky wrote a number of books. Now, what I'm going to quote here word for word is a quotation from one of those books. It's titled Earth in Upheaval by Emanuel Velikovsky. Now, what he's doing here is giving this is one page of one book. One page of one book. He's giving a very compact, highly condensed observation of what happens in a pole shift. Observations based on what he found going around the planet and finding the evidence. It's titled A Working Hypothesis. Let us assume as a working hypothesis that under the impact of a force or the influence of an agent, and the Earth does not travel in an empty universe, the axis of the Earth shifted or tilted. At that moment, an earthquake would make the globe shudder. Air and water would continue to move through inertia. Hurricanes would sweep the earth, and seas would rush over continents, carrying gravel and sand and marine animals, casting them on the land. Heat would be developed. Rocks would melt, volcanoes would erupt, lava would flow from fissures in the ruptured ground and covered vast areas. Mountains would spring up from the plains and would travel and climb on the shoulders of other mountains, causing faults and rifts. Lakes would be tilted and emptied. Rivers would change their beds. Large land areas with all their inhabitants would slip under the sea. Forests would burn. Hurricanes and wild seas would wrest them from the ground on which they grew and pile them, branch and root, in huge heaps. The seas would turn into deserts, their waters rolling away. And if a change in the velocity of the Earth's rotation, slowing it down, should accompany the shifting of the axis, the water confined to the equatorial oceans by centrifugal force would retreat to the poles, and high tides and hurricanes would rush from pole to pole, carrying reindeer and seals to the tropics and desert lines into the Arctic, moving from the equator up and down the mountain ridges of the Himalayas and down the African jungles, and crumbled rocks torn from splintering mountains would be scattered over large distances. And herds of animals would be washed from the plains of Siberia. The shifting of the axis would also change the climate of every place, leaving corals in Newfoundland and elephants in Alaska, fig trees in northern Greenland, and luxuriant forests in Antarctica. In the event of a rapid shift of the axis, many species and genera of animals on land and in the sea would be destroyed, and civilizations, if any, would be reduced to ruins. It paints a pretty bleak picture, and hopefully that won't be what we're in for. I can't stand here and prognosticate exactly what we're in for. I can tell you for a fact that the federal government has been spending hundreds of millions of your tax dollars getting ready for this since at least 1979, at least. That the Fortune 100 companies, or at least many of them, I don't know which ones, but many of them know about this. The major governments know about this and are making preparations. China and Russia both know about this and they're taking what precautions they think are important and need to be done. There's a lot of people and a lot of entities that know about this.
This has been the Confidential Report. For even more stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel today. And please show your support by clicking the like button on this video. For even more stories and news you deserve to know the truth about, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you for watching the Confidential Report.